you talked about being well-rounded, and I read a book a couple years ago, and the book had this idea of what they called the talent stack. And the idea was, you may not be the smartest mathematician, you may not be the best football player, you may not be the best at whatever it is, but if you're well-rounded and you can do a number of different things well, then that in combination makes you a much more effective pilot, lawyer, businessman than having a real narrow expertise in one real narrow field. So when you're talking about being well-rounded, because I really do want the young people listening to this show to understand and appreciate as specifically as possible the kinds of things that they need to do to be successful if they want to be pilots. What are the kind of aspects of people's personality? What are you looking for as a colonel in the United States Air Force? What kind of skills and talents do you look for specifically when you say somebody is well-rounded?
Yeah. So to use the saying, nobody wants a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of what defines a person is how they react to a stressful situation or a conflict in your life. It's not the problem that defines the person. It's how the person handles or reacts to the problem, which is really what sets individuals apart from each other. Right. I would honestly say that almost anybody can fly a fighter aircraft. It is not that difficult to fly. It's much more difficult to put that aircraft into a certain set of parameters with which to employ weapons, which at the end of the day is what a fighter aircraft is for. But yeah, just because you get a 1600 in your SAT doesn't mean that you're going to be some phenomenal, fighter pilot, nor does it mean that you're going to be a phenomenal lawyer, a phenomenal businessman, et cetera. Now, it does say that you have an extremely, high intellect and you have the ability to take tests really well, which is great. And so when you look at the well-rounded person, you want somebody who, how do they handle adversity? How do they react to a highly stressful situation? How do they work as a team? Because I can tell you right now, there is no successful business leader, civic leader, military officer, et cetera, that isn't surrounded by a phenomenal team.
Yeah.
And so, if you highlight yourself that, hey, you're good by yourself, but the minute that you're put inside of this team dynamic, you fall on your face, then that's not the person that you want, because you're only as strong as your weakest link.
You can't fly those jets by yourself. You got to have a team, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, we, in our core fighting force, if you will, in the F-16 community is a 4-ship. So 4 F-16s employing as a teamwork. And every once in a while, you'll go down to a 2-ship. So 2 F-16s, but you are never by yourself, ever.
Yeah.
It's the wingman concept that we've all kind of heard before, but you take it to a different level when you're employing in combat and you're relying upon that person who's flying a couple miles away from you to keep you safe and vice versa. And so, yeah, you can't take somebody who's selfish and not team focused, not goal driven, goal oriented, and who only wants to make sure that the team wins. Because if you win by yourself and the team doesn't win, then that, mission lost. It's a mission.
That's right. That's right. One thing I've found in the business world is you tend to be a little more successful as a team when you do not care that much who gets the credit. And that's kind of a hard, sometimes people want to get a little credit. They do a good job. They want to take a little bit of credit for it, and that's okay. But if that's what you're looking for, then maybe you're not the best teammate. So one other thing I want to ask you about this, Colonel, before we get into your experience flying planes, is you mentioned something earlier about racking and stacking them. And when you get there, the number one person gets the number one choice and on down the list. So what kind of things are they looking for at pilot school in order to rank your abilities? Is it just the schoolwork and the classwork and stuff like that? Is there a physical component to it? So what are the different things they're looking for when they're evaluating potential pilots?
Yeah. So Brian, in Air Force pilot training, there is no physical component per se. You don't have to go, you have to take an annual physical fitness test, but that really has no bearing on how you rack and stack when you graduate from the actual pilot training course. It is essentially, the vast majority of it is your flying aptitude. And so you take tests in the air, they're called check rides. You're graded on every single event that you do, whether it's a quiz in the classroom, a test in the classroom, every single ride that you have in pilot training is a grade sheet. It's a graded event, every single one. And then at the end of a block of instruction, then you have almost end of semester exam, if you will. And so you have to pass that. And that happens at the end of every block. And so it is, it wears on you. The constant competition is.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah.
I mean, it is grueling, and plus it's long hours and it's high stress. And
you're going against the best of the best. I mean, you're going against people that there's a reason they're there. It's because they're highly, highly competent people.
Oh, yeah. Everybody is super type A. I mean, if you're not type A, you instantly weed yourself out. It just is the way it is. And so that really is the answer to your question, Brian. And then about 25 to 30% of it is a subjective grading by the instructors in the squadron that you're going through pilot training. And so if you call 70% is made up of the academics and the flying, and then the other 30% is them essentially evaluating you as an individual, where they think you would fit most beneficial to the Air Force. Because again, at the end of the day, it's the Air Force, it's not you. Right?
Yeah.
They look at it like, hey, this individual would be a good fighter pilot. This individual would be a good tanker pilot, helicopter, stay as a first assignment instructor pilot in pilot training, which is what I did before I went and flew F-16s. And so they place you, or they attempt to place you as close as they can to what matches your personality as well. Now, is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. I mean, nothing ever is, right? But it works pretty well.
Pretty darn good, yeah. Based on the results, yeah, pretty darn
Absolutely.
good. Well, so and when you brought up something that I want to just flag here for a second, because you've been an instructor too, right? So you've been basically on both ends of the deal. So you've not only been evaluated, but you've done the evaluating. And so what kind of, when you say, I think this person will be a good fighter pilot or a good tanker pilot or a good helicopter pilot, like what characteristics do you look for, Colonel? Or what do you think it is that makes somebody a good fighter pilot?
Some of it is, man, Brad, that is a tough question to put some type of objectivity and solid points towards, but it really is, it is a equal balance of team player, charisma, driven. I mean, you have to be driven, you have to be a hard worker, and you have to be able, the attention to it, the devil's in the details, right? And it doesn't matter what business you're in, but in the flying business and in the fast jet business, man, details kill, right? And at the end of the day, you have to be able to trust that individual who's on your left or right wing with your life. Every single time you walk out the door, you're trusting them with your life. And and so that is hard to package up. But you know it when you see it. Similar to, I'm sure, when you're litigating or you meet another lawyer and that you have an experience with, you can tell there are some that are good and there are some that are really good, right? And you just know it when you see it. Now, does that work every single time? It doesn't, and we all make mistakes. We all make bad judgments on character, et cetera. But, what I found is if you can take somebody who is highly detail oriented, a team player, extremely aggressive, but also charismatic and cares about the people around them and making the team move forward is really what I have found kind of the best, I guess, mental recipe to be a fighter pilot.
Colonel, I was talking to Bucky Richardson last week about on the podcast about some leadership issues. And one of the things that he said, we had a conversation about this, was about judgment and trusting your instinct. So while it sounds like some of the evaluation you do may be a little, quote, subjective, what you're really talking about, I think, is taking very experienced military fighter pilots, and they have a developed sense of judgment. And, we were talking, Bucky and I were talking, and it wasn't until I was maybe in my early 40s that I started really paying attention to my gut, my instincts. And I noticed when I kind of look back on my life, the times where I ignored my instincts or my gut, I normally made a bad decision. And, there's a lot of research on this. I mean, for example, there's a guy named Gavin DeBecker, who's an international security expert. He does Jeff Bezos and all these other people. And he wrote this book, and I read it. And one of the things he talks about is a book about personal safety, keeping yourself safe. One of the things he talks about is trust your instincts. Like if you're someplace and something doesn't feel right, you need to listen to your instincts. And so it really gave me a new appreciation for, like you said at the very beginning of this piece of the conversation, it's hard to put into words, but when you've been doing stuff long enough, you develop this sense of judgment, this instinct on who will and will not be a good fighter pilot, or like you said, a good lawyer or a good whatever.